See, this is me, Boba Fett.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Chiss Ascendancy podcast. This is Josiah, and you are on day 25 of 30 days of Boba Fett. We are almost there. And today I actually have a fun little extra something for you. I've got my buddy on here, and I know him as Vanth's Armory on Instagram. But I'm going to let him introduce himself to you. What's up, man?
How's it going?
So tell us a little bit about yourself. So I don't know if this is how it works for you, but when I'm on Instagram, obviously everybody that's kind of in our friend group on Instagram knows that me and Skeleton Astronaut are probably the closest friend I've got on Instagram. And it's weird because even when I met him in person, I was like, Brandon. It was weird because I just hear and see everybody as their Instagram profile. So introduce us, let us know your real name, if you don't mind,
That's
and
okay.
tell us a bit about yourself.
My name is Joe, which is short for Joseph, not Josiah in this instance. I'm from Ireland, so I'm several thousand miles away from where you are right now. I started my Instagram page, which is at Vanth's Armory, about, I think, 2 years ago now. About the same time that the second season of The Mandalorian started anyway, when Cobb Vanth was first introduced. And it kind of started out as a fan page for him while also being like a TVC, which is Star Wars A Vintage Collection
Right.
page as well. I don't have a huge amount of followers, but I'm happy with the people I have because I get on well with them, and
Yeah.
you're one of them. So that's
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
yeah,
so you're from Ireland. So right now we're recording. It's almost 1 o'clock here, so it's about 7 p.m. your time.
thereabouts. Yeah, it's 10 to.
Wow. Okay, awesome. And so would you tell me a little bit about what put you on to Cobb Vanth? Was it watching him on The Mandalorian, or did you know about him prior to that?
I had totally by accident come across him because I'd been reading about the Aftermath trilogy that
Right,
came out
right.
back in, was it 2015?
Yeah, the first one dropped whenever they had the movies more regulated, like every December or whatever, they would
Yeah,
have, hey, the movie comes out this Friday, and that same week there's going to be a visual dictionary. And they had promised a lot of things in the Aftermath trilogy. And I think that same week that The Force Awakens came out in 2015, they released that first Aftermath book by I think the author's name was Chuck Wendig.
it was. Yeah. I think he used to write for Marvel as well.
Yeah, I think he
Um,
was a comics guy first.
yeah, and we won't get into how he stopped writing for Star Wars, but anyway, I sort of read a Wikipedia article about the books, and I found out that there was this cowboy who had basically taken Boba Fett's armor, and I was like, that's absolutely awesome because I love westerns. Like,
Right.
westerns are my other big fandom outside of science fiction,
Okay.
and outside of Star Wars. And the idea that this Clint Eastwood type character had suddenly just taken Boba Fett's armor and was using it not to be Boba Fett, but just to do what he needed to do was
Mm-hmm.
just like that was just for me perfect Star Wars.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
and
So
world building.
did you end up reading the books, or did you just kind of go with what you had known as because of Wikipedia?
To be honest, I'm just looking off camera for a sec. To be honest, I went, I read the articles, and then I went to try to read the books. And I said try, but I won't go into that. I highly recommend reading the Wikipedia articles.
That's awesome.
I kind of got like he's a great character, and he introduced some fantastic characters into the lore, but
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like he was writing a script
Mm,
first and writing backwards into a novel, and maybe he didn't have the time to finish. But I don't want to say anything outside of that or criticize him because maybe
sure.
that wasn't the case. Uh, I'm sure there are fans of the novels, but I'm happy we got Cobb Vanth in live action anyway. That's all I'm.
Yeah, I think Star Wars is so interesting because you have these moments where you can, for instance, let's say that you're not a fan of the sequel trilogy.
Mm,
Um, Even if you're not a fan of the sequel trilogy, I think we can all agree that it was really fun to get to meet and grow with
Yeah,
Kylo Ren. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
so even, The Last Jedi was probably the most controversial Star Wars movie we've ever had. And
Mm,
even still, the character development of Kylo Ren in that movie is so crucial and so good. And Adam Driver does such a great job fleshing out that
mm,
character. I think
mm.
the same can be said for the Aftermath trilogy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that and I feel kind of bad for Mr. Wendig because the promises from Del Rey and Disney and Star Wars itself was like, hey, you have questions about, what happens to the Empire. And um, it was also during the time where we had no idea who Snoke was, but everyone wanted to know who Snoke was.
Mm.
And they had kind of hinted at the fact that we're going to find out his origins in these books, and he's nowhere to be found. there's,
Nowhere.
there's no Snoke in all three books. So,
There's
but I think Cobb Vanth was the, the pot of gold at the end of that kind of treacherous rainbow because, he's such a beloved character. And I was so
yes,
excited to see him, on screen.
absolutely. And there was other great material there with the other bounty hunters as well. Like I think Aftermath was the first novel in canon where Dengar had a significant role as well, if I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. And like there was a great sequence where he was fighting. I think was it Jasamari in the first novel or one of those characters.
Yeah.
And like it kind of highlights how old he is because
Mm-hmm.
Dengar is like pushing 60 when he's in the original trilogy, like, and it's
Right.
great because you don't get that perspective in Legends at all.
Right. Yeah. I think in Legends, it's like he was 40 10 years ago and he's 40 today. Like
Yeah,
he
it's
just kind of
just,
stays the
it's
same
just
age. But
he's
I
like
think it was,
Spider-Man. He's always 17.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was really cool because again, I think the best part, not to rain on the parade of the characters that Mr. Wendig created, because I thought Sinjir was an interesting character.
Mm.
Obviously, Mr. Bones is the coolest original
Oh yeah.
character. He's a repurposed B1 battle droid that's like a killing machine with a heart. But I thought he did really good work. Obviously, Cobb Vanth was an original character. That's probably the most important one. But he also, like, some of his Lando stuff, Han stuff was pretty good. And I really appreciated that not only did we get Dengar back, but we also got to experience Embo, because Embo and Dengar were working together in that I guess the little side stories were called interludes.
Yeah.
And so that was really interesting. And I wish that the interludes, I don't know if you've read or listened to the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy from Tim Zahn.
I haven't yet, but it's on the list. It is
Yeah,
on the list.
the final book in that trilogy just came out a little while ago, and there's something that that Zahn does that's really interesting, which is he will have let's say we're at chapter 5, and then you'll have memories, and so they float back and forth between chapters and memories. And the thing that's the most important, though, is that the memories chapter affects the current time chapters, if that makes sense. So let's say we're, it's kind of like that meme that's like, you might be wondering how I got here, and it's kind of like that thing where you see Thrawn's in this predicament, or he meets someone and they're like, oh, wow, you again. And then the next chapter is a memories chapter, and it introduces that character or how Thrawn knows that character. I think that if Mr. Wendig would have done something where the interludes had something to do with the main storyline, maybe it played out better.
Absolutely.
But I guess today's topic of conversation is, obviously, I'm a huge Boba Fett fan. You're a huge Cobb Vanth fan. And we also like the other character. Like, I love Cobb Vanth, but Boba Fett's my main guy. You love Boba Fett, but obviously you're a Cobb Vanth guy. So I guess we were messaging back and forth on Instagram, which, as toxic and terrible as social media is, it's cool that we get to meet guys like me and you probably never would have met if it wasn't for Instagram and social media and Star Wars. So that's really cool. But I guess we were talking and we were wondering if Boba Fett comes across Cobb Vanth on Tatooine. I think that Filoni didn't just bring, Favreau and Filoni didn't just bring him out of canon books to have him in one episode of The Mandalorian and we never see him again. My thought is we're probably going to see him again at some point. So let's say Boba Fett and Cobb Vanth meet. How do you see that going? Do you think that they coexist, or do you think there's any kind of rivalry because he had Boba's armor?
I know there's an awful lot of sort of speculation and commentary in the community about, and I would call this kind of a misinterpretation, where
Yeah.
people are saying that, Vanth is, the canon version of Jodo Cast, but he isn't really, because he wasn't trying to be Fett. All he was doing was using the armor to protect his people.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I feel that Fett, he name checks Vanth in the episode where he returns, which kind of implies that he knew him. Now, whether that's that he's only discovered who he was, or whether that's he's known him for the last 5 years since Return of the Jedi and he was aware of what he was doing, has yet to be, confirmed. But I get the feeling it's more the latter, that he knew who Vanth was, and that he, even if he didn't like him, he respected his, morality and what he was trying to do.
I agree.
So I kind of get the feeling there's potential for a grudging respect there. I don't know if you and I don't know if some of your viewers, if they're old enough or young enough, but anyway, I've watched Deadwood. I feel that there's a potential for a similar relationship, or even justified, a potential for a similar relationship between Vanth and Boba Fett as there was between Timothy Olyphant's character in those series and the sort of antagonist character in those, where it was kind of a love-hate thing.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like similar to oh my gosh, is it I can't remember the character with a real big smile from Justified.
Boyd Crowder.
Yeah, they have kind of a love-hate relationship, and it's more of they respect each other, but they can't. It's like one's a lawman, one's an outlaw. But I think it's very similar, and I think you hit the nail on the head. I was thinking, I usually write down little bullet points or whatever for when I'm doing an episode, and something that I had written down was Cobb Vanth isn't Jodo Cast. Like, that was literally something I'd written down. For those of you who aren't privy to what we're talking about, there's a comic from back in the day called Twin Engines of Destruction. I don't know how I remember this stuff, but but there's this guy going around, and because the Mandalorian armor wasn't something that was widely spread out, even in the Mandalorian, there's fewer, but there's more than, back in the 90s, it was like Boba Fett has this armor and nobody knows where it's from, and he's the only one that has it. It kind of had that even more mystical status. But there was a young man by the name of Jodo Cast who was going around, and he wasn't just using Mandalorian armor without approval. He was telling people, I'm Boba Fett. And that was, he was using that for, the young people would say for clout, he was using that to get him into the nightclubs, like stuff like that, where it's like, oh, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm Boba Fett. And so Boba Fett ends up catching up with him, and there's much more of an enmity towards Jodo Cast. I think that not only is the situation different, but let me know if you agree. I think Boba Fett's character and personality are much more docile than what we got in Legends.
I think to a degree, I would agree. But at the same time, while he was an awful lot angrier in Legends, I think the new version of Boba Fett is capable of far greater violence than the version that was in Legends. Because the original version, the original image was basically Clint Eastwood in a spacesuit.
Right.
Just kind of quick draw, that's it. Whereas this guy, like, we've seen how Boba Fett dealt with the stormtroopers on Titan, like it was brutal.
And without his armor at first too, just with the Tusken gear,
basically beating people with a stick. It's hardcore stuff. But like, I feel, I don't know if there was I think there's still a potential for Jodo Cast to actually be introduced as well.
Oh, that would be awesome.
But I think if that was to happen, Cast would have to really be made into a bigger character. He'd have to
make some waves, I think.
He'd certainly have to be more dangerous than he was, because I think he actually originated as a sort of one of those RPG NPC characters in the source books.
Okay.
And it was after that he went into that comic that you were talking about. But he hadn't got any character development. It was literally just, he's here now, Fett kills him. That's it. That was all that
it was very
famous.
There was this moment where it's like Boba Fett just puts his blaster on the back of Jodo Cast's helmet and is like, this is an ambush. and you're dead. Like,
Yeah, that's the iconic
that's the
panel,
whole
like
dialogue.
yeah.
But I agree. I think that Cobb Vanth is, if anything, he's the furthest thing from Jodo Cast, because if Boba Fett would have walked up to Jodo Cast and Legends and said, "Hey man, identity theft is not a joke, Jim," and like it was telling him like, "Hey, you got to give the armor back." Jodo Cast would have been like, "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm," like, he would have stuck to his guns almost,
Absolutely.
I think when the Mandalorian says, "Hey, you can't have that armor, man. Like, that belongs to the Mandalorians, and I respect what you're doing." Cobb Vanth, if the Krayt Dragon hadn't been there, Cobb Vanth may have just very well just handed over to Din Djarin. You know what I mean? Like, it was because there was a necessity that we get the episode we do. But if that necessity wasn't there, he may have just gone, "Yeah, you're right. The right thing is to hand this back over." And I needed it. I got the use out of it. My people are safe now. No big deal. There was no resistance, I don't think.
No.
So do you believe that Boba Fett knew who Jodo Cast was? Or, sorry, not Jodo Cast. I'm so sorry, Cobb. Do you think that Boba Fett knew who Cobb Vanth was? And if so, obviously he knows the name, but do you how, on a scale of 1 to 10, how aware of Cobb and what he's been doing in Freetown do you think he was, and for how long before The Mandalorian season 2 takes place?
I was just thinking as you were describing about Cast there as well. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be hilarious if it turned out that Fett, the very day that Din Djarin went to go into Mos Pelgo, Fett was about to go in as well and be like, "Give me back my armor." And he's just like, "God damn it!"
Yeah, he lost it.
So that dramatic turn is actually like Fett just secretly like cursing the whole situation because he has to go and find somebody else now.
Just track down the armor.
But I do get the feeling there's been a space of time where he, like, if Fett's supposed to be the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy, he's going to have that armor tracked down within minutes of when he lost it. If it's gone, he's going to know where it is. He's going to know what the situation with it is, even if it takes a space of time. Like, I'm looking at the Slave One behind you there, Joe, and I'm saying to myself, because we've seen the clip in the trailer where he obviously is reunited with Slave One after a certain amount of time, or at least that's how I interpret it.
Right. So it seems like that's a moment between episode 1 of last season and obviously episode 6 of last season when he's flying in again. Yeah, I think that's taking place during The Mandalorian season 2.
So potentially he, like, I would have even said maybe even that's a bit before. I was wondering, like, if he had to gain access to Slave One and then use that to find the armor, maybe through some inbuilt tracking device or whatever.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, because you've got your chain code, which is essentially like, in the Bad Batch, the chain code is being established because it's a means of the Empire tracking everybody. But Boba Fett's had the chain code attached to his armor for other personal reasons to prove he is who he says he is. It makes a lot of sense that, if you're an up and comer bounty hunter, or if you have a problem with Boba Fett, or if you hate the Mandalorians or whatever, the worst thing you can do is to steal his armor. I can totally see him having some kind of tracking device in Slave One. That's a really good point.
I think in the what was it called? Was it the Armor Wars or the Mandalorian Armor trilogy?
Oh, the Bounty Hunter Wars. The Mandalorian Armor was the first book
of the 3. Yeah, there's a scene in that where he uses the armor, or one of those novels. He uses the armor, and Slave One comes to him, I think, isn't it? There's a sequence similar to that. So potentially, like, there could still be a potential for that. I honestly love to see a scene in the book of Boba Fett where he, like, presses a button and the Slave One just comes up over, like, a town or a combat zone.
Yeah, it doesn't seem, I guess, because we're in 2021 and you can remote start your car and things, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But I want to say it was in Timothy Zahn's Dark Force Rising, they talked about having slave ships, not ships that transport slaves, but basically it's a ship that has essentially, let's just say, like a Bluetooth connection to another ship or to your armor or whatever. In the same way that we can remote start our car, it was like groundbreaking, when Timothy Zahn wrote it. But they could basically have a whole fleet on standby. You don't have to be in the ship to fly the ship, I guess was the point. And so I think that'd be really cool if you could see, there was a fan film. I don't remember how long ago or what it was called or whatever, but there's a moment where Boba crawls out of the Sarlacc and he's still got his armor in this fan film or whatever. And he hits something on his gauntlet, one of them, and over the one of the dunes of the Dune Sea, Slave One comes flying. I can totally see us seeing something like that. I think it would be sick if Fett gets in I don't know if you watch Game of Thrones, but there's that moment where Daenerys is kind of like up against the wall and she's dead to rights. It's like season 3 or 4 or something. And she calls on the dragons and they come and burn everybody to save her. It would be cool if there's a moment where, and here's it could be prophetic right here, just saying. But what if there's a moment where him and Finnick are kind of dead to rights and they're surrounded and he's, beep, bop, boop, and Slave One comes around and just like takes everybody out. That would be sick. But I think, the Boba Fett of old and Legends from like the 90s and early 2000s, I think that he was more emotionally ruthless, but less physically dangerous, just like you're saying. I think that the Boba Fett, I know you've been keeping up with some of these videos I've been putting out of the Legacy of the Force, whenever he's that's, to me, mentally and leadership wise, that's his prime, when he starts to really go, okay, like, Finn Shisa told him, like, you got to get past yourself. Like, you're not a man if you protect just yourself. And obviously for Boba, that's a big deal, to be a man and to be a leader, obviously trying to make his dad proud. And so I think that level of mental maturity coupled with the physical danger that he imposes from the Mandalorian, I hope to see those two things combine in the book of Boba Fett. And I think a character like Cobb Vanth could actually be a real benefit to Boba Fett, because Boba has kind of had this tunnel vision his whole life of like, what do I do to become Jango Fett? Essentially, what do I do to be the best version I can be for my dad? And for Cobb Vanth, he's actually been enslaved before, and he knows the bigger picture of life, and that people are more important than your legacy is how do you treat people, essentially. You know what I mean? I would love to see them team up. And going back to a couple of videos ago about Boba Fett having the solid black armor in the War of the Bounty Hunters, it would be, obviously in Legends he's had multiple sets of armor. It would be sick if he had an extra set and he's like, you need this more than me or whatever, and he has his armor that's re-armored, that's Jango's, but if he had a separate set that he gave to Cobb Vanth, you know what I mean?
Even like the I'd love to see, like, I think the holiday special colors would look really cool on Timothy Olyphant. Oh my
goodness, don't even get me started
with the gold and the red. It looked just awesome.
But I think if as an action figure collector and toy photographer or whatever, I don't have any characters. I guess you could use like a Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan Kenobi, but it would be a cool idea to take the holiday special figure that we've gotten. You had the old Legacy collection, from early 2000s. I don't know what it's like in Ireland, but it's like a total crap show trying to get exclusives on Target in the US.
Well, I tend to have sometimes local sellers here manage to get them. So
really,
that or I order most of the mainstream stuff from Big Bad Toy Store over in the US. But like
just ship it.
Yeah. But today now, for example, those ARC troopers that went up, I ordered them off a local seller.
Oh, so, nice. Okay. Yeah. I was going to say it would be really cool. The only character I can think of that would resemble Timothy Olyphant's Cobb Vanth would maybe be a Revenge of the Sith Obi-Wan. It would be cool to put his head on a holiday Boba Fett body and just see what it looks like. That would be interesting. Of course, we're getting the Black Series Cobb Vanth, but I'm anxiously awaiting the Vintage Collection version.
Well, like, what, like, we've seen how much Hasbro absolutely adore ridiculous repaints for no reason. So, we could very easily see just if whenever the TVC version comes along, you could easily see, at least I could, a version of him just in holiday special colors released at some point.
Yeah.
And even if it didn't appear on screen, you'd at least have it for your shelf and your photographer and whatever you want to do with it.
I think I would love to see, obviously to call it What If would be kind of too much of a copycat, but it would be really cool to there was a comic series called Infinities, I want to
Yeah,
say.
I read that. Yeah,
It would be awesome if they had Star Wars Infinities on Disney Plus. I don't care if it's live action, animated.
yeah,
It's obviously easier, as not easier as far as the process, but easier to be like, okay, well, Ewan McGregor doesn't want to do it, so we'll just color him in. You know what I mean? But it'll be super cool to get, um, you know, some of those characters. You could get that's I think for me, as far as a marketing sales mind, that's the way you get the Solo twins back into the Black
mm.
Series and Vintage Collection. That's how you get, some of those characters. So let me ask you this. If you're, let's say that Disney Lucasfilm calls you tomorrow and they say, Joe, we need you bad, not enough Irishmen on set. We need you to direct your own Cobb Vanth show. Where do you take it? Where does your mind go?
I try and I suppose I look. My temptation would be to make, I would say, a kind of a Star Wars Western, but we've kind of had that. So maybe a variation of that. I'd love to see a kind of a Star Wars equivalent to either Deadwood or Justified. We were going to have that with the New Republic Rangers,
Mm-hmm.
but considering the starring character in that now has sort of gone MIA,
Right.
and they haven't confirmed who was going to take or what is going to take over instead. Like I could see that being reworked as a Cobb Vanth vehicle.
Yeah, I think so too.
Maybe take him off Tatooine and give him like a role in the New Republic. Like I think Cobb Vanth would really work as a like an actual Star Wars equivalent to a Texas Ranger. You being from Texas,
Yeah.
just sort of like one riot, one ranger. That kind of
Yeah.
hard ass kind of stuff, and he would fit that perfectly. The one criticism, to be honest, I had of Cobb Vanth in The Mandalorian was that he was sort of sanitized by comparison to the way he was in the book, because
Mm-hmm.
in the novels he was pure Timothy Oliphant hard ass.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah, I think he was there's a moment where I can't remember the character. They changed the story a little bit when it got to the Mandalorian, but basically
mm,
he's trying to help free his friends and stuff in what they end up renaming Freetown.
mm,
And there's that moment where they've got him like dead to rights and they've got him like all bloody and bruised up. And he's like, I'm not going to stop until you kill me. And if you don't kill me, I'm going to kill you.
mm.
And I think to see Timothy Olyphant can 100% deliver that line. I just want to see that would be really cool. And I agree. I think, you know, one thing that the Republic was supposed to have that there are these big parts of Star Wars that there's a line that you'll hear in a movie and it's like, well, hang on, what's that story? You know what I mean?
Mm,
And that you
mm,
can explore when they go and Anakin's a slave. Padme's like, well, slavery's illegal in the Republic. And they're like, yeah,
mm,
Tatooine's not in the Republic. Obviously, slavery and drug trafficking in the underworld, even though it gets in the way of the Empire, it also benefits the Empire because
mm,
it creates the chaos that the Empire can come in and control and say, hey,
mm.
look what we did for you, you know?
Yeah.
The New Republic, I would assume, would work very hard at getting rid of,
Mm,
the underworld, not the underworld as far as bounty hunters and things like that, but like, you know, obviously this is like a dark place to go with it, but obviously like
mm,
places on Tatooine, like, sex trafficking is happening,
mm,
that like spice and drugs and all those things. It would be really cool if Cobb Vanth was a character that, you know, let's say it's Leia, Leia Organa Solo, or it's Mon Mothma, hears of this guy. And I think that Cobb Vanth has rubbed elbows with enough people that the word could get out. Hey, there's this character that took over a town full of slaves on
mm,
Tatooine. Let's get him on board. And like you're saying, maybe he becomes like, you know, a Texas Ranger style character,
mm,
but he's out and about. He's going to Corellia. He's going to Nar Shaddaa. He's going to these
mm.
places with the backing of the New Republic. I think that would be sick. And maybe that's a good way to get him some New Republic style armor that isn't technically Mandalorian, but has that same aesthetic and has that same look to it. You know what I mean?
Or even to sort of change up his appearance so that he looks more sort of stereotypically Timothy Oliphant cowboy, with the hat and everything. Like
Yeah, yeah.
there's loads of examples in Legends of characters with with cowboy hats. Well, Star Wars cowboy hats.
Right.
But in canon, like so far, we've only got Cad Bane, and like
Mhm.
there's got to be more hats in the galaxy. Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I agree. Yeah, I think like it was really crazy because when the Dark Horse comics were kind of at their peak between episodes 2 and 3, that was like the comics we're getting now are fantastic. Every Wednesday I open up my Marvel app and I'm like, I just search Star Wars and see what single
Yeah.
issues have come out, you know. But prime Dark Horse comics to me was between episodes 2 and 3 because they were just pumping out Clone Wars content, getting you ready for Revenge
Yeah.
of the Sith.
Absolutely.
And you had Kakruk, the Whippet, who
Yeah.
later on in Dark Horse times, whenever it's the Legacy era with Cade Skywalker, he is that cool the sombrero of the Orient, as we've called it on the podcast. But that ended up becoming iconic. Like anytime I talk to you or Finn or Brandon Skeleton Astronaut, some of these other guys in the council and stuff like that, when we're talking about a Kakruk remake, we're like, you know, the figure itself is actually pretty great and it already has soft goods. Just repack it, make it not $85 minimum loose, and put that little, you know, that little hat in there with them. And that's the only way you can make it better, you know? So there's definitely lots of hat options out there. I think of, you know, the Constable Zuvio hat that has become kind of notorious. Every time you see a character like that, you're like, is that Zuvio? And I still to this day, I don't know if there's just other characters that have that hat. I think there's more than just him, but every time I just assume it's him because of how many toys were put out of him for no reason. But like Imbo, dude, I can see Cobb Vanth, you know, not that it's a metal, you know, UFO style hat, but I can see him having a hat that is also a utility. You know what I mean? Imbo had that hat that was like basically Captain America's shield, but on his head. So that would be really cool.
What I think would be really cool. Well, I think it could stray into the Jodo cast territory, but it'd be awesome if in the Book of Boba Fett, you know, there was a scene and, you know, Cobb Vanth did team up with Boba and say, as you put in your podcast there, that Cad Bane did appear. If they were to defeat him and Boba just bends down, picks up the hat and goes, "This is yours now." Like, that'd be like,
oh, dude, that would be iconic. Yeah.
Just
That'd
put that on cool. Or whatever. You know what I mean?
It'd be cool. I love that because Filoni is involved, he knows all the little lines that help with things. So it would be cool if, you know, Timothy Oliphant bends down and, like you said, they've taken Cat out and he puts on the hat and he could say, "Man, this is a nice hat." It would be cool if they gave that line or something like that.
Because he, even in Justified, the last season of it, like the character basically, spoiler alert, gets a new hat, but you know, it's 10 years now, so you haven't watched it by this stage.
Right.
So he could, you know, it could be like a different kind of look, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be cool. I think that there's a lot more. This is how I felt with Thrawn when I was reading the Heir to the Empire trilogy. When I first started learning about Thrawn, I was thinking, there's so many characters that are good but not great in Star Wars. Why aren't we getting more about this character? And now we're finally getting, you know, now there's just a treasure trove of like, you have, because it's cool because I've said that, you've heard me say this a million times, but even though Legends is Legends now, if I want to open up my Audible app or go to my bookshelf and get Heir of the Empire, Disney's not going to say, don't read that. You know what I mean? Nope. Like they still want you to enjoy those things because they're still getting revenue from it. You know what I mean? So the Heir to the Empire trilogy, the Thrawn trilogy, now the Ascendancy trilogy, they're finally really fleshing out this character. Yep. And I do think that Cobb Vanth and his personality and he's kind of a Han Solo character with stronger convictions and more bad to the bone than Han Solo. And I think that we could really capitalize on that character.
He's also like Star Wars' first, like, you know, we've got loads of gunfighters in Star Wars. We've got loads of outlaws. Like, he's actually really the first, and even in Legends, there wasn't really that many. He's the first Western lawman archetype.
Yeah, I agree.
And I feel like there's huge room to capitalize off that as well, and have even not just him, but have other characters in that sort of, you know,
in that sphere.
Archetype.
Yeah, I agree. I mean? Yeah, because in Legends, you've obviously, I assume you've seen the Old Republic RPG trailers.
I played it, yeah.
You have that character with the cowboy hat, but when you first meet him, he's arrested because he's smuggling spice. Like, he's not really a good guy. Like he's the Han Solo character that takes a turn for the better. But Cobb Vanth is really, like you said, he's one of our first characters that has the heart that he has, but also has the, the carries himself in that Western lawman type way that we've never really seen before. And I think that style is such a beloved style. It's I think it's so great. And I think it's to me as an American, it's so cool to have someone from another country talk about how they love Westerns, because that's I get, especially in Texas, you grow up with that. You know what I mean? Like my mom and my stepdad were just at the house picking up my kids to take them to a little thing for the day, Christmas thing in town. And my stepdad walks in and he's wearing a cowboy hat, and they have rattlesnakes where they live.
Yeah.
And anytime they see a rattlesnake, they kill it, they skin it, and they make a hat band. So my stepdad walks in, he's got this big old black cowboy hat with a rattlesnake hat band around it. And I was like, if Vance Armory was here, he would just crap his pants looking at that cool outfit. But we haven't had a Star Wars character like that. And I think that it's an untapped, to use a Texas term, an oil mine, an oil patch. So I think that would be really cool. Before I let you go and we wrap this thing up, being from Ireland, are you a fan, or is he overrated over there, of Conor McGregor in the UFC?
I'm not going to make any comment on that individual.
Okay. So I'm a huge MMA UFC fan. So like Saturdays, I'm always watching them and stuff. So it's here's my guess. It's similar to, I guess, like LeBron James here in the US, where it's like you have a crowd of people that love him and he's the GOAT, and you have a crowd of people that they can't stand him. It's probably pretty well split over there, huh?
Well, there's other shades to the situation that we would know about locally that mightn't necessarily be known of abroad.
Oh, dang. Okay. So this is like an offline conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Hey, well, this is pretty cool. I don't think we've ever really done a third-party interview on the podcast before, and I've had a blast. It's awesome. It's wild every time. I know what Brandon Skeleton Astronaut looks like, and when I walked to meet him, I was like, this guy's not a skeleton with a helmet on. So it was still crazy when I answered the Zoom call. It was funny that I was still waiting to see like Timothy Oliphant with the red scarf. But it's cool to see you face to face, Joe. I hope you have an awesome day. And thank you for being on the podcast with us.
And thank you, Joe, as well. And
awesome,
I hope you have a happy Christmas.
Thank you very much. You guys have a Merry Christmas over there. You'll get there 6 hours before me. So if anything crazy happens in December or in 2022, you'll have to let me know before it gets to me.
I bet, of course.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been day 25 of 30 Days of Boba Fett. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, may the Force be with you.